everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this session, Liberating Students and Teachers with Journaling. You've already completed poll number 1, I see, and I didn't really get a chance to see who is in the audience, unfortunately. I'm sure I'll find out later, but welcome and thanks for coming. I'm gonna try to figure out how to, I had all these plans for managing the chat and everything, but mainly ESL, wonderful. Okay, welcome, because I am also ESL teacher, so great to have all of you. All right, so just a little bit about me. I work for Prince George's Community College. I've been there for almost 5 years now, and teaching ESOL in the Transition ESOL program. So, oops. Oh no, come on. There, all right. Okay, so what is your experience with learning to write? When was the first time you ever tried journaling? For me, it was around 3rd grade. My best friend's mother gave us both journals with little padlocks and keys, and I wrote in it from time to time, but never consistently. And as I progressed through school, writing classes became more about getting good grades, and that meant writing as close to perfectly as possible. And that made it really hard to scribble in a journal or even enjoy writing very much. So when I became an ESOL instructor, I found myself teaching 8th grade English, and I was expected to have my students journal every day. I had so much to teach and only 50-minute class periods, and I was never sure journaling was worth the class time. And I certainly didn't have time to read 150 journal entries every week. Back then, I would journal with my students occasionally, but I didn't have a personal journaling practice. So a few years have passed since then, and I've developed a stronger personal journaling practice and a better understanding and appreciation for how useful journals can be in English classes for various types of learners. And this presentation is mostly the product of my personal experience teaching writing to English language learners and my personal experiences with keeping a journal. So journaling is an old idea, but after today's session, I hope you find new inspiration for pursuing it. So many of you I recognize may be experts at journaling in your classrooms. So maybe you won't learn anything new, but again, maybe you'll get new inspiration, I hope. All right. So this was the poll you already completed, so we don't need to do that. But then I also wanted to get to know a little bit more about your experience with journaling. How often do you use journaling in your classrooms? Let's see, so this is where my assistant would activate the poll, and I don't know if the poll has been activated or not. Can anybody tell me if the poll has been activated? If this doesn't work, we can also just skip the polls. I don't see any not activated. Okay. Okay, well, maybe we'll just skip the polls for today since I don't have a great way to communicate with my assistant. Okay, yeah, you can go ahead and put in the chat whatever your experiences are with, so you can't, she can't hear, right, she won't be able to run the polls. Okay, well, we'll just skip that. All right, but don't use journaling, never use journaling, but my students do enjoy writing. Well, that's good. Rarely use journals. I start every class with a journal topic. Great. Don't use journaling. I have used them over the years. Would like to do more. Okay. So it's a mix. All right. And then, let's see. How often do you use journaling? Okay. Why is this not progressing? Oh, that's right. I have to click. Okay. So how do you feel about journaling in class? I just wondered, and the options for this were going to be if you feel like it's an excellent use of class time, or it's an okay use of class time, or mostly a waste of class time. Again, we don't have a great way to get the polls activated, so you can leave your comments if you like in the chat, and then we'll move on. Okay, so today's objective participants will know why journaling is worth the class time. You will also have a chance to practice journaling, to empathize with and guide your students. And we're going to make a plan for implementation and providing feedback to students. All right, so here's the plan for today. We're just about done with the introduction part, and we'll start talking about how journaling can really liberate our students. We'll do a journaling experience. We'll talk about benefits, implementation, and feedback, do another journal experience, and then we'll talk about briefly talk about how journaling is good for teachers too. And I'm not even sure how this works with timing since we started so late. So I guess we'll get started and then we'll figure that out in a little bit. All right, so, and then hopefully we'll have time for some questions. All right, so here's the materials you need for today. Pen, paper, pencil, or a computer. Some people like to journal by typing. I do recommend that you try writing by hand though, because most of our students in our classes, they have to write by hand, right? Because not all of us have a computer lab. Okay. All right, so you can look around and grab some writing materials. We'll do journaling in a moment. So here's our section on liberating students with journaling. Here are a couple of quick questions to think about as we launch into this section. Do we expect students to prepare a speech before speaking? When students speak, do we correct every grammar mistake? No. So maybe we should not have such high expectations for every time they write. Oops, can we go back there? So here's what I mean by this. We speak all day long, but how often do we write every day? It's often easier for students to get speaking practice than writing practice. So in some English classes, not all English classes, but in some, much of the time is spent on explaining features of writing, grammar, vocabulary, organizational structures, and only a small portion of the time is actually spent writing. I know this because for years I taught writing classes in exactly that way. Then I would ask students to write a sentence or a paragraph or an essay on a topic and turn it in. I would mark their errors and return it with a grade on it. If this is the experience students have, then no wonder some of our students who struggle, like our ESL students and our adult basic education students, no wonder some of them decide they can't write and hate doing it. So let's do a quick review of the writing process, right? Step 1, idea generation, brainstorming, mind mapping, free writing, and lots of different ways. Free writing is really kind of like journaling, right? Same thing really. Step 2, we could call pre-writing, definitely a kind of journaling. Step 3 is drafting. We're trying to put some form and organization, beginning to make some organization onto what we're saying. Step 4, revising, definitely talking about trying to figure out if we've organized our ideas well, are we saying things clearly? Step 5, editing, where we pay attention to grammar and mechanics. And step 6 is finally publishing. Most of the time for our students, that means submitting their writing for a grade. So of course, there are many variations to the writing process, and it's rarely a linear process. But notice that grammar and mechanics, meaning spelling, punctuation, and capitalization, are generally only of importance late in the whole process, right? Most of the time, step 1 through 4 is really all about developing the ideas in a piece of writing, okay? So the idea development is takes most of the time, is really the most important part of the writing process, and journaling is part of that that section. So journals are like a sandbox for playing with ideas. So focus on students' ideas, right? So I know some of you probably at this point are thinking, but if we just let them write freely, won't they be repeating all their errors, and how will they learn without their errors being corrected? And you certainly can correct errors that occur in journals. I just recommend that you do it very sparsely. And we'll definitely talk more about providing feedback to students using their journals later on. Okay, but at this point, let's go ahead and jump in the sandbox and play a little bit. All right, so we're all adults and we teach adults. So this might be hard for some of you if you don't have young children in your life, but try to remember being a kid and the first time you picked up a pen, pencil, marker, or crayon. What did that feel like? How did people respond to your marks? So do your best to write without stopping to revise or edit anything. And I will also attempt to journal with you because I think it's important for us to do this with our students, to role model with them. So I'm going to set up for my journaling. You can grab your materials to get ready, and then I'll set the timer and we'll do it for actually, let's do 3 minutes since we're so very late. And honestly, I think I was planning to journal with you, but I think since we've had technical problems, I'm going to try to check in with my communication streams to make sure that we're all okay while you all journal, okay, for 3 minutes. So I'll set the timer. Imagine me journaling with you, okay. Are we still all okay? Are we still here? Thank you. Thank you, Melanie Pinkert and Laura and so many others. All right, so ready, set, write, and write. 3 minutes. About 30 seconds left. And there's the timer. That was 3 minutes. It goes by so quickly. I would recommend that you give your students more than 3 minutes to write, because it might take them 3 minutes before they even start to write. But all right, so let's hear from some of you. What was your experience in this writing? Was it easy for you to get started? Did you hesitate? Did you hate your handwriting? Sometimes that's a common one. Okay. I don't see a lot of comments coming. Had to struggle a bit to get some ideas. Yeah, so that's common. Okay, so somebody had a significant memory about that. And see, did think a bit before I was ready to write. Yep. Okay, somebody remembered to being 2. Okay, vivid memories. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, the experience for our students is to be varied as well. Some people will kind of freeze and not be able to think of anything. Some people will think of something immediately and have something to say. I'm going to go ahead and share some other common experiences that people say. Sometimes people say, oh man, my hand hurt, right? Because we rarely write by hand these days, right? Either we don't write at all, or we're always texting on the phone with thumbs or fingers, or we're typing on our keyboards for work. So if you write by hand, your hand might ache, and that's normal. And each writing session, think about if you go play soccer or do working out or something, you have a warm-up session, right? You don't just like jump into it and expect your body to be in it. So the same thing for those little tiny muscles in your hands, right? Be gentle with yourself and realize that, you know, the first few sentences might hurt a little or feel stiff. If you hate your handwriting, you know, as your finger muscles get stronger, your handwriting might improve. You didn't write anything or wrote very little, that's normal. You know, our thoughts are really kind of floating all around in our heads in an amorphous way, and writing is an attempt to put structure on them. And it's not that simple. Maybe you thought this is pointless, I know how to write. Maybe you have a negative thought in your mind, you know, negative voice. We all have these internal critics. Or maybe you have a negative memory. And, you know, this is what journaling can do, is bring up these feelings. And we'll talk a little more about that internal critic and how to embrace that later. So I didn't know about coloring inside the lines. I hadn't realized there were rules about coloring pictures. Oh yeah, that's terrible. Rules, ugh, right? Those are the things that, you know, block us and make us get frustrated in class, isn't it? All right, so as we've realized from our first journaling experience, handwriting requires physical fitness in our hands. So here's one way to think about it, like virtual swim class, ridiculous, right? So imagine, I'll tell you, okay, make scoops with your hands and then stretch your arms out. All right, good, good. And you're gonna turn your head to the side, and then this is how you breathe. And now make sure that you breathe out your nose and in through your mouth, because if you do it the opposite way, it could be deadly. So good job, everybody. You passed the class, even though you never got in the water. So this is probably how it would look and feel when you finally did get in the water. And we don't want our students to feel this way about writing. Build up their confidence as we help them develop their skills through a lot of playful writing practice. Okay, just a moment. Okay. All right, so, oops. Okay, so let's talk about benefits of journaling. Okay, so teachers sometimes devalue journaling because they have so much to teach, but there really can be so many benefits. It can develop writing skills, of course, and there are personal benefits as well. Let's talk about writing skills first. Journaling puts the rough draft in its place. It's okay to not be perfect. The focus is really on the ideas, right? It develops automaticity in handwriting. It's sort of like when we drive a car, right? At this point in our lives, we don't think very much about how to drive. We just get to where we want to go. And when writing is automatic, we can just say what we want to say without being distracted by the page or the pen or our ugly handwriting or the aches in our hands, which leads to the next point. When writing becomes more automatic, students can think more deeply. This leads to better critical thinking. When they have to debate an issue or research or write an essay, you can encourage students to ask themselves questions, ask their own selves questions about what they're writing in order to dig deeper into the concept. We know critical thinking skills are difficult to develop, but they're so necessary. So the journal is an excellent place to promote the deep reflection necessary to develop those critical thinking skills. The journal can also be a place to reflect on learning. Whatever concepts you're teaching in class, you can ask them to write about, what did they learn today, or what do they already know about this subject, or what questions do they still have about the subject. And then definitely, and this is where, people want to know, how do you give feedback on what they wrote in their journal? It's a personally meaningful material for them to practice their own revising and editing skills. Okay, so some personal benefits of journaling for students is that they can express their worries on the journal and then put their minds on the lesson. They can, when you journal, sometimes you identify problems in your life, especially if you give them a free writing exercise. Sometimes, they discover that they're complaining about a certain person or a certain situation all the time, and it helps them sort of clarify what the problem is. And then if you know what the problem is, you can begin to solve it. Also, journaling, when you share journal entries with each other in the classroom, it can help build classroom community for your introverts. We all have those students who love to talk, and then those who don't love talking, but the introverts can write their thoughts down, and then maybe they feel more comfortable reading and sharing from their journals. So for all of these skill building and personal benefits, writing becomes less stressful and more fun and more meaningful for students. Okay, so now let's talk about choices for implementation. Again, are you going to have students writing by hand or by computer? I'm working on developing a class for this fall, and it's going to continue to be online, and I think I'm going to make them do typing practice. So, but if you're meeting your students in person, they could be writing by hand, and maybe you don't have a computer lab. But that's something to think about. Is it okay if they go home and they type up their journal entry and turn that into you? That's some choices you have to make. Timed versus page requirements. Do you want them to be able to write half a page, 1 page, 3 pages? Depends on the level of your students, of course. Maybe you have very short class periods, so you want to limit the amount of time that you spend on journaling. In the Transition ESL program where I teach, we have 3-hour classes. So having students journal for 20 minutes at the beginning of class, 20 minutes is a great amount of time to spend journaling. You can really kind of sink into your thoughts and really get into it. And it also, being able to have students journal for 20 minutes means that I can walk around the room while they do it, if I'm not journaling with them. And look over their shoulder and, maybe have ask them a little question about what they're writing. So you'll have to make some, and like Mary Palmer Legere says, it's good to mix up the different methods. So whatever works, or maybe mix it up, things to think about. And certainly, what type of prompts are you going to provide them with topics? Sometimes it's fun to have students come up with their own topics. Topics can come from anywhere. They can come from current events. They can come from things that you were talking about in class previously, or you know, if you walk by and you look at what they're writing in their journals, you know that somebody's interested in something. You could have a topic that's based on that. Again, maybe you want them to reflect on their learning of something from class. Maybe you give them no prompt at all and have them free write. Some students will love that because they have lots of ideas and they don't like rules and being told what to write. Other students will not like that because they like more structure. Other choices for implementation, how are you going to share all the writing going on in class? And I do recommend that you do some sharing. You don't have to share all of the entries. There's no time for all of that, but are you going to have one student read out loud to the whole class? Maybe you as the teacher pick up their journal and read it on their behalf. Or maybe you have them partner up and they each share their reading. But the point is that sharing helps build the classroom community as students get to know each other better. And it also builds their self-efficacy, their self-confidence, knowing that whatever level of writing they're at, their writing communicates ideas, right? And they can use that to share and get to know and connect with the people in their class. So again, I would be cautious to get overambitious and collect all the journals and take them home and read them all by yourself. It can become overwhelming depending on how many students you have, but that is a choice that you can make if you have the time or if that works. Okay. One more slide on choices for implementation. Are you going to grade the journals or not? I recommend that you give maybe some brief intermittent writing conferences and just talk about, how is journaling going for you? Or you could, make comments on things that they are working on and advances you see in their writing, but not like necessarily a specific, grade. Or maybe you could make a rubric for participation. Maybe they get a grade because they wrote one page every day or something, or maybe over time they have increased their length. And maybe one student starts out by only writing 2 sentences and another student writes a whole page. So maybe that person, grows by writing a page and a half, and the other person grows by writing half a page instead of 2 sentences. And it's hard for me to keep track of the presentation and the chat at the same time, but I see somebody wrote, Deborah Goldstein says, can journaling be effective as homework or only in the classroom? I think it could be both. Again, you could ask them. I do think that when you begin a journaling practice in your classroom, it's useful to role model it, to journal with them, have everybody do it together so you can see where people are at. You could give them a topic to write on for only 5 minutes if that's all the time you have, and then say, okay, I want you to continue writing on this topic for homework. So the answer, I guess, is both, or it depends, but it can certainly work for homework too. So I really recommend that you don't grade an entry for correctness, right? Because remember, if we look at the writing process, journaling is part of the idea development section, and it's really not about being correct. Students choose an entry to revise, edit, and submit for a grade. So this is one source of ideas that students can draw on for developing finished papers. All right. Okay, so if you've never done journaling in your class before, here are a couple things. Warning, here's what you can expect. Sometimes students' writing is very personal. So of course, you don't want to force anyone to share what they wrote. And when students write something personal, just try to, it might make you feel a little nervous or awkward, but realize that this is also an opportunity that if they're struggling in their life, we can help connect them with the services that they might need. When I was teaching 8th grade English all those years ago, there were a couple times I had students write about very violent things, and I had to share that with the counselor. And this spring, teaching online, I had my students, do some journal typing, and I had one student who talked a lot about, sort of struggling with staying positive. He felt kind of hopeless, and so I was able to, check in with him and privately and just say, hey, how's it going? Did you know that the college has a wellness center? That if you want someone to talk to, more about this, we have those services. So, and that's good. We want to not only just teach them grammar and vocabulary, we want to, cultivate the whole human, right? So some students write very little at first. So you have to be patient with them. And that's why if you write in a journal yourself, you'll understand this, right? Some of you you'll be stuck. Maybe today you wrote very quickly on the first journal experience, and maybe on a different topic, you'll be stuck. So provide encouragement and just keep writing in your own journal. And also finally, some students write a lot, right? Almost too much, right? And you're like, how do I read all this? So just set the expectation that you cannot read everything that everybody writes. And likewise, you can just set a limit on sharing by page or class time. Okay, so this was going to be another poll question, but since I'm sort of disconnected from my assistant, we are not going to run this. I was going to ask you, how often do you correct errors in journals? Most of the time, it depends, never, or I don't use journals in my classes at all. So you can go ahead and make some comments in the chat if you like. Do you use correct errors in journals most of the time? Depends, never, okay. Yeah, just comment on content, yeah. Okay, sparingly. Oh, yes, and that's a good question. So I checked with Ms. Grayla, my assistant, during the last journal experience, and she said that I should just keep doing the presentation because it's being recorded. But if you have to leave, by all means, you go ahead and go on to the next session. So we are going to go past 11 o'clock. But if you need to go, that's okay. And I really appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts in the chat. I wish we could see each other and be in person, but this pandemic is coming to an end for most of us in the United States, at least. So, all right. So types of feedback. I like to think of it as two types of feedback. We have teacher feedback and peer feedback. So you can have affective feedback relating to students' content. Like some people have mentioned in the chat, when they comment on the journal entries, they just comment on the content. You could ask questions, and this of course encourages critical thinking and clarity. While I think you shouldn't correct all their grammar errors, if, for example, you've been teaching a specific grammar in class, you've been really talking to them about capitalization, and you recently had a lesson on that, you could point out one or two capitalization problems, or say, oh, remember our lesson on capitalization? Can you find any capitalization errors? That after the journaling is over, say, can you go back to this and catch any of your capitalization errors? So again, editing limited. So peer feedback, again, affective, relating to peers' content, questioning, which encourages critical thinking and helps them make their writing more clear, right? Of course, we all know as writing teachers, we need to share, we need to have other people read what we write because it's clear in our heads, not necessarily clear to someone else. And then for peer feedback, I recommend that you not allow peers to edit people's journals. only give suggestions for revising because, again, the focus is on ideas, and students don't always appreciate being edited in that way, especially when it's just a journal entry. And yeah, so best to avoid that. But definitely having students share their writing with each other encourages or develops their self-confidence, knowing, oh, you know, what I say is being heard by someone else and makes sense to them. I can write in English, right? Okay, so here's a sample of student writing. And I realized I tried to increase the contrast for everyone, but I'll read it out loud just in case it's hard for some people to see. How did you get your first job was the topic. I got my first job with my friend. He took me to the company to apply, and we started fill out the application. When the manager saw the application, he said, "You don't have experience." I said, "Yes, sir, but I can start as a helper." He told me, "Okay, can you start tomorrow?" I said, "Yes, I can start tomorrow." And then he gave me the address of the site job. I was very happy to get my first job. So what would you say to this student as you walked by, or what might you write on the student's paper as you walked by? So just think for a moment what that might be. There's no right or wrong answers. You know, it might depend on what you're working on with your students at the time, right? Think about the types of feedback we talked about. Does anybody want to share a thought in the chat? Okay, well, of course, think about the length of the sentences. Okay, thank you, Melanie Pinkert. Okay. All right, well, in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and switch to the next slide. This is, you know, just a suggestion. This is what I might do. I like to underline errors or areas that need to be corrected and give students an opportunity to correct their own errors. So you can see here I wrote, "Your confidence and assertiveness got you the job." Can you find some more places to add periods? So certainly if we've been talking about finding the end of a sentence, or like Melanie Pinkert said, you know, the length of your sentences, then it might make sense to just a gentle pointing out, you know, can you go back and edit and correct your own errors? And, you know, maybe confidence and assertiveness are vocabulary words. And so I've role modeled the use of those vocabulary words, and I've related to the content. Okay, here's one more. This is only one. We only have two. So I'll read it again out loud. This time, I asked the students to think about the future tense, that might be useful when you talk about the topic. What are you going to do during spring break? I don't know yet what to do in this spring break, but I am thinking of visiting someone's I don't see for a long time, but I am still planning because she lives far away. I have to drive for 16 hours, and this is hard for me. I don't know exactly what I am doing in this spring break. So again, you know, just a moment, think about, you know, what would you say or comment on to the student? No right or wrong answers. Depends on what you're working on with your students. Okay, and this is, you know, maybe what I would put here, you know, remember the future tense, and take a look at this part right here. How could you make a correction here? Yeah, do you see future tense sentences in the paragraph? Okay, yeah, good, exactly. So draw the student's attention back to, you know, the focused grammar, okay. And here I'm role modeling the future tense, the different ways that we use or create the future tense in English, right? I don't know what I'm going to do this spring break either. I hope to spend time with my family. I will probably do some gardening. So very gentle comments, right? Just to relate with the student, share ideas, and role model the targeted grammar in a very soft and gentle way. Okay, so we are almost finished with our section on how journaling benefits students, how journaling liberates students. And we'll be talking about how it liberates teachers in just a moment, but just a really quick note about how students need to know, they really need to know that their messages matter. More than having native sounding mainstream American English. Too many students are shamed for not speaking or writing what linguists call consensus English. And we know there are more than 24 dialects of English spoken in the US, but consensus English is the version of English that is generally accepted as correct English. And linguists know that so much of our beliefs about correct English are just rules imposed by those in power to privilege their own dialects over others. So when we think of it this way, we can see that all language really begins with the desire and necessity to be understood. And the rules of a language are agreed upon to facilitate understanding, but the original goal of any language is to convey a message. So in classroom journaling, the message is what matters the most. Because the goal of journaling is not to produce correct English, the practice can help students hear their own voices and gain the confidence to use them. And this is so valuable, of course, for our ESL students, as well as our adult basic education students who might speak a dialect other than the consensus English. So, all right, so here is our second journaling experience. This time you can spend a few minutes. We'll just do 3 minutes, which is not very much time to think deeply, but we'll just do our best. And you can, of course, continue after the session thinking about this. But let's make a plan for journaling in your classes. Think about implementation. You could spend the time brainstorming some prompts. Are you going to do free writing or reflection prompts? Think about the feedback. Teacher feedback, peer feedback, affective feedback, grammatical feedback, and any other questions or concerns you still have at this point in the presentation. And we'll, like I said, talk briefly about journaling to liberate teachers, and then we'll be finished with the presentation and we can answer some questions. Okay, so 3 minutes, ready, set, go. Okay, that was 3 minutes. It went by very quickly again. Any, let's see, any new experiences that you want to share? I'll tell you, this time I wrote a little bit, and I noticed how terrible my handwriting was. And it's especially bad today. So you can tell your students that their handwriting will change from day to day. And today mine is especially bad because I'm full of, presentation energy. So my handwriting is awful. All right. Any new experiences or comments? I know we're losing. We had twice as many when we started than we do now, because of course it's after 11 o'clock. But all right. Okay. Well, then we'll just if you have questions, we'll answer those in the question section. Let's see. Okay, now we're on to a brief section on liberating teachers with journaling. Okay, so journaling is good for teachers too. Obviously, journal entries can provide teachers with a quick assessment of student understanding and progress on targeted grammars or vocabulary. Provides lots of authentic material for students to practice revising and editing their own work instead of having to provide worksheets for them all the time, or worksheets that are kind of, stiff and not very personally meaningful. But a journal entry can be very personally meaningful and more motivating to students. And certainly if you keep your own journal practice, you can use it to reflect on your own teaching. Think about how did that lesson go, and write, this went well, but I'm not sure about this. And you maybe write down your notes about what you'd like to do next time. And of course, you can use it to reflect on your own life and diminish your own stresses in life, right? Find out what things are actually causing problems to you, and then begin to solve those. And, less stress in everyone's life is great for everyone, isn't it? Just a quick note about, the critic, right? We all have a censor. We've got, I don't know about you, but I've got, the censor on one shoulder who's like telling me all the ways that I'm terrible. And then like this tiny, tiny little voice on the side that occasionally says, "You're fine, Nicole, everything's going to be okay." Right. So when we journal, sometimes the self-criticism comes out, and but it's a way, again, to question it, identify it, and then tell that voice to kind of calm down. And so journaling is useful for teachers too. All right, so if you will, this is our very last journaling experience. 3 more minutes. This time, there's no prompt. So sometimes it's useful for students to free write at the beginning of class just to clear their minds, as we said. And this is easy for some students, but difficult for others who like to have the structure. But let's just spend 3 minutes trying to write about whatever, just to see how that feels. Okay. All right, so let's start the timer, 3 minutes, and then we'll wrap up with the questions and answers. 3 minutes. That was 3 minutes. Hopefully this was also a useful experience for you, writing without a prompt. I'm going to go ahead and read you my entry because, that way, sometimes you don't know what to say. And the point is to just keep writing until something comes up. So here's an example. No prompt now, what to say. This is where I can just repeat myself over and over and over saying, I don't know what to write. Should mention this to the participants. Let students meander. And even beginning level ESL can keep a journal of lists on sentences. What to buy from the grocery store, holiday gifts, gratitudes. So that's my very jumbled no prompt entry. So remember, the point is just to write and to generate ideas. All right. So the point is that writing is a physical activity that requires muscles and time to practice. There are different ways to implement journaling and to provide feedback. There's no right or wrong answers for doing it. You probably need to spend some time experimenting to see what works best for your students. Students' messages matter, so please just focus on their ideas mostly. And journaling benefits teachers too. It's good for us as well. All right, I just want to give a quick special thanks to Dr. Karen Nelson. She's a lead teacher and curriculum developer at the Transition ESOL program at Prince George's Community College. She helped me think through this presentation and gave me a lot of support and provided me with the photos of the student writing because I couldn't find any for my own. All right, so at this point, we review our learning objectives. Do participants know why journaling is worth the class time? Can participants journal to empathize with and guide students? Can participants make a plan for implementation and providing feedback? So I hope you enjoyed this session and have a new understanding of how journaling is a practice that can liberate not only students, but also teachers. So if anybody is still here and has questions, I'm happy to answer questions at this time. And so I guess you'll have to type questions into the chat since we can't hear you. Oh, I heard some sound. Oh, that must be.
Okay, so I'm coming back in because I see you're at your questions. So hopefully if people have questions that they are typing them in the chat. I want to thank all of you, in particular Nicole, for just a wonderful presentation. Just looking at it, it was great. So that was wonderful. So I'm sure the people who were able to hear and to participate with the activities got a lot out of the presentation. So once again, please be sure that you leave feedback for Nicole. I put the link in the chat. It will also pop up again at the end of the presentation. So feedback is a gift, and I'm sure that you want to give her your gift of appreciation for this presentation. So I don't see any questions in the chat. So I think that that's it. Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you, Grayla.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, bye.